The top stories of 2012 and what they mean for 2013. Happy New Year, and welcome to a special edition of Black Nouveau. I'm Joanne Williams. For much of this week's program, we've gathered a panel of guests to talk about the main events of 2012 and discuss what lies ahead in this year. But we begin with The Abolitionists, a three-part American experience docudrama that begins next Tuesday. It looks at how the abolitionist movement in the 19th century turned into a major force that changed the nation. Here's a sample.
Only a few can now tell of the peril that brooded over the land when the anti-slavery movement was born.
Mother, it is my duty to bear testimony against...
Angelina, mind your own business.
It is my business, and it's your business too.
My mother was named Harriet Bailey. I can't recollect of ever seeing her by the light of day.
I am tormented by the thought of the slave mothers whose babes are torn from them.
I am willing to be persecuted, imprisoned, and bound for advocating African rights.
Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin.
I stand before you as a southerner, exiled from the land of my birth by the sound of the lash and the piteous cry of the slave.
My dear Mr. Douglas, join me.
What is the mob? What if that mob should burst in upon us and commit violence on our persons? Would this be anything compared with what the slaves endure?
How many slaveholders have you converted? How many slaves have you freed?
Slaveholders have forfeited even the right to live. And if the slaves should put every one of them to the sword tomorrow, who would say that they deserve anything less than death? It is not light that is needed, but fire.
The Constitution of the United States of America is an agreement with hell. So perish all compromises with tyranny.
Sorry!
What are you talking about?
The war!
If we fail, we shall go down as we deserve to go down. But if we succeed, our glory as a nation will be complete. Our peace will flow like a river, and our foundations will be the everlasting rocks.
We're joined now by historian George Gonis. We're going to talk about Wisconsin and the abolitionist movement. And you and I both agreed that we could sit and talk about this for hours and hours.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Wisconsin was very involved in abolitionism before the Civil War, long before the Civil War.
Very much so.
How was Wisconsin involved before the Civil War began?
Well, particularly when you think of people seeking freedom in Missouri and in that area of the country, when you head north, Wisconsin is essentially directly north. Wisconsin had two things going for it, and a lot of the people who were resisting slavery through flight heard about Wisconsin in advance. There were two reasons. One, you want to get to Canada. There are all these ports in Wisconsin, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, obviously, and so you could board a steamer there and get to Canada. And also the sentiment that existed in Wisconsin, again, people seeking freedom knew about the nucleus of abolitionists that were here, and there were lots of them. And the reasons that there were so many, Yankees settled Wisconsin. The two most predominant religious groups, Unitarians and Quakers, a lot of those folks came, they were New Englanders, upstate New Yorkers, came here and settled Wisconsin. They brought their abolitionist beliefs with them. You also had the 48ers. You think of Wisconsin's German background, and it started with the 48ers. There was a revolution in Germany that failed. They came here. They were by and large very liberal, progressive, anti-slavery scholars, scientists, journalists, teachers, and they founded the Turner Societies in the United States. And of course, between people like Carl Schurz was later an advisor to Lincoln, but he was German. He was a Turner, part of the 48ers. So between the Yankees, Unitarians, Quakers, 48ers, that core of abolitionists were here.
Now, we probably all know that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. The Republican Party was started in the state of Wisconsin, but it also had some strong ties to abolitionism.
Oh, very much so, very much so. An event that happened about 10 days before the Republican Party had its famous founding meeting, or a very famous founding meeting in Ripon, was the rescue of Joshua Glover. And that resulted in Wisconsin being the lone state in American history to defy the Fugitive Slave Act, an act that said, no, if someone seeking freedom escapes slavery and goes to a free state, you have to return by federal law. You have to return that person. You certainly can't harbor them, hide them, help them escape. In fact, you have to return that individual to slavery. Wisconsin was the lone state that defied that act, that Henry Louis Gates, the great historian, says it's the most insidious pro-slavery act in American history. And there was one state that declared it unconstitutional. That was Wisconsin.
Some people may have heard the name of Joshua Glover somewhere in their history, certainly not what they learned in school necessarily, because it's not taught to the extent that we think it should be.
Right.
But who was Joshua Glover, very briefly, and what did he do?
The Underground Railroad had been operating in Wisconsin at least since the 1840s, so there had been dozens, if not hundreds, of individuals who had already sought freedom in Wisconsin. Glover was one of those people who came to Wisconsin in 1852. He, again, escaped from the St. Louis area, found his way to Racine, got a job in a sawmill at Racine. So now, instead of being a man who was enslaved, he had a job, he was getting paid for his work. He became a very well-known, well-liked, well-respected member of the Racine community. But the Fugitive Slave Act is still in force. Glover's ex-master, a man named Benamy Garland, finds out where he is, comes here, brings federal marshals in the middle of the night, basically goes to Glover's cabin when he's playing cards with friends, beats him in the middle of the night with the federal marshals. They have to come back to Milwaukee because it's the federal seat, and Glover's put in the jail, which is on today's Cathedral Square. It was called Courthouse Square at the time because that's where the courthouse and jail were. And but word gets around with the abolitionists in Racine, telegraph about Glover's, send telegraph news of Glover's capture to Sherman Booth, abolitionist editor here. Booth Street in Milwaukee is named after Sherman Booth. And a crowd of 5,000 gathers, which is a huge percentage of the Milwaukee population at the time. In addition, and you also have the Committee of Colored Abolitionists in Milwaukee. They were part of the square too, very much a part of Glover's rescue. And after speech making and resolution passing, they finally decide they have had enough of this, and they St. John's Cathedral and its surrounding buildings is being built at the time. They use a construction timber from the construction site, from the cathedral, to knock down the jail door, free Glover, and he begins a 40-day Underground Railroad odyssey, all in Wisconsin, until he finally is smuggled aboard a steamer in Racine. He ends up back in Racine, smuggled into Racine, and he goes to Canada and spends the next 34 years of his life there.
Now, in those last few minutes, you've given a history lesson to a lot of people who probably never heard of any of this. In 1 minute, tell me why you believe we don't know this history.
It's just something that has slipped through the cracks, and it's hard to really say why. I think when the Underground Railroad is presented in history nationally, it's presented with an East Coast Harriet Tubman kind of thing, and nothing against, there's a very active Underground Railroad in the East Coast. Harriet Tubman is obviously a very important person, but you know, years before Harriet Tubman escaped, Carolyn Quarles came to Wisconsin and had some very courageous actions on her part and narrow escapes, and I think partly it's people forget that it occurred in the Midwest. This was the maritime headquarters of the Underground Railroad's Western Front. Wisconsin was, because it was often the last stop for freedom seekers in a freedom seekers journey toward Canada. This was the very last stop, so it's vital. And the national press at the time recognized this. When Wisconsin defied the Fugitive Slave Act, the New York Times celebrated Wisconsin's, quote, constructive treason. So at the time, Wisconsin was very nationally famous from 1854 when Glover was rescued, and Wisconsin officially declares, the Wisconsin Supreme Court declares the Fugitive Slave Act unconstitutional. And we continued to make national headlines. And then for some reason in the last century and a half, the awareness of Wisconsin's enormous role, because the rescue Glover is one of the contributing factors to the Republican Party being formed just as I said, 10 days later.
Probably a very complicated reason why we don't know more about it, but certainly we are going to learn more with the abolitionists. Thanks very much for talking with us. We
You're
enjoyed
welcome.
the conversation. Always so much more to learn.
So did I, absolutely. Thanks.
The Abolitionists begins Tuesday, January 8th at 8 p.m. on channels 10.1 and 36.2. And now for our look back at 2012 and our look ahead at 2013. We have a distinguished group of guests to talk about their thoughts. First of all, we have psychologist Dr. Ramel Smith. Next to him is LaToya Dennis, a reporter for WUWM Milwaukee Public Radio. Josephine Hill from the Wisconsin African American Women's Center, and Gerard Randall, an education consultant and InterCHANGE panelist. Welcome all.
Thank you.
Let's begin with Gerard, since you're used to talking, in a group of people on InterCHANGE. What was important in 2012, aside from all the voting and all the political stuff we went through? What did you feel was important in Milwaukee?
I think that we have a change in leadership in the African American community among our elected officials. If you look at the recent elections, what you'll see is that on the county board, most of the representatives of the African American neighborhoods are new. They're in their first term. Only 2 of them are experienced. If you look at the state legislature, the longest serving member of the state legislature would be Representative Leon Young. All the rest are pretty much in their first or second terms. And when you get over to the Common Council, you have more experienced leadership, but there may be some jockeying there, particularly if all the speculation comes true that the mayor is off to another job. In that case, Council President Willie Hines moves up, and that creates a whole new scenario around who may then run for mayor or any of the other vacant spots as a result.
As we talk about all this possible juggling around, how difficult does it make it for a reporter trying to keep track of what's happening in Milwaukee? What are you going to have to do in 2013?
We're definitely going to have to get out into the community and talk to people. I mean, there's so much that's going on that it does make it hard to kind of keep track of what's going on. But I think it's important to do for the community to know, because if there's changes in leadership happening, that definitely does impact everyone.
Josephine, what kind of impact does that have on an organization like yours?
On the nonprofit organization, we're all jockeying for money, going to different organizations. But, I think that the new leadership is very innovative. They're young, especially on the county board, and they've done some critical things already, and I won't say exactly what they were, but they have been on the forefront in terms of being leaders, actual leaders, and taking stands. So I'm real impressed with them. With the African American Women's Center, hopefully we'll be able to garner some of the funds that are going to be available this year, hopefully, especially with the CDBG Black grants. So we're hoping that we'll be lucky.
Ramel, when people deal with these kind of change in leadership and all the things we had to deal with in 2012, and we even got to, I would say, election fatigue in 2012. How are folks doing in Milwaukee?
Well, I said sometimes with all of that, we get that emotional concussion. Sometimes you just get swung around each way. But I think now that we start to talk about the new leadership we have, I think that's creating a great change of hope whenever people start to look about, is this going to be the same old, and specifically when we look at new leaders who are not just going to be active, but are going to be productive, we look to see how that can affect social change, dealing specifically with our leaders abroad. We saw a lot of the unfortunate situations that happened in 2012 with some of our residents. We want to see how those leaders now will interact with that change and be more productive.
In 2012, one of the things that was occasionally talked about and then sort of faded away is unemployment and job creation. It was discussed, it seemed like, when it was useful, and when it wasn't useful, it was sort of put to the side. But we still have a huge unemployment rate. What's going to happen next?
Still on the front burner, because many of those who were elected ran on a pro-jobs, jobs creation platform. That they were promising that if they brought nothing back to the community, it would be an opportunity for more jobs. And certainly there's more money that will be invested in job training and job placement activities. Now, whether or not that translates into people actually getting into jobs that the business community creates, that will be the more telling picture of the new year.
Hopefully that will translate into more jobs. What happened at the Wisconsin African American Women's Center during October and November We did have a get out to vote effort there, and it was unbelievable that we had over 3,000 people to come forward looking for jobs. So I know that there are people who anxiously would like to work, so I hope that some of them will be able to be employed soon. We only had a few jobs there, but over 3,000 people came to try and get some of those jobs.
And, you know, I think it will be interesting to see what happens in 2013 when it comes to unemployment, though, because a number of businesses have said that we're not hiring because of the uncertainty when it comes to what's happening politically. Well, we know who our president is because President Barack Obama was reelected, and we know where we stand with the Affordable Health Care Law. And so it remains to be seen if businesses will get back to hiring, but that uncertainty surely is no longer there.
Well, we still have the discussion over, I hate this phrase, the fiscal cliff.
Yes.
And what's going to happen with taxes and entitlement programs. Has that had an impact on the general public in 2012?
I think it definitely has. Whenever you have any type of uncertainty, that causes just a great deal of stretch. We are all creatures of habit, so we like to know exactly what's going on. When there's that range of uncertainty, specifically as we talk about unemployment, not knowing how I'm going to pay for food, not knowing how I'm going to pay for my rent or for my mortgage, that creates a great deal of stress. And when you get a great deal of stress, that tends to come out in a negative fashion. So when we talk about these behaviors that's manifested negatively, we now have to look at what unemployment does to us socially.
It also seems like the whole discussion about our fiscal situation in the United States causes stress and causes problems.
Certainly.
What do you
Certainly.
hear?
You know, I'm hearing that too. What's happening is people are just so uncertain. They don't know, should I even pay my taxes? Are my taxes going to go up? I heard that there was this guy who just won the $1 million lottery. He's taking his money right away because he figures next year that's going to have a greater impact on him if the taxes are going to go off the chain. So people are hanging in limbo. They don't know. They're just waiting, I guess, don't know what's going to happen. And uncertainty, as Ramel said, causes a lot of stress.
We have a lot of people who are retiring too, particularly government workers that they know now what their retirement packages are going to look like. And so in these last few months, what we've seen are people poised to retire from government jobs that have pension packages that have some certainty to them. And the uncertainty for them is if they stay on a job longer, even though they're young enough to continue working, what will that do to those programs that they've invested in for their retirement? So you're going to see a lot of people that will be making changes in jobs. In many ways, that will create job opportunities for some of the younger people who are just entering into the workforce, but it's certainly going to create a lot more angst for those people that are young enough to still work, have those bills coming in that still need to be paid, and will be out looking for either part-time work or the full-time work.
LaToya, when you do stories about financial situations and about the fiscal situation in the United States, who do you talk to? Do you talk to people in your age group, in your demographic, or people in other demographics?
It really does vary. I talk to a lot of business owners who are looking, saying, hey, we're going to pay these dividends early because we don't know what's going to happen next year. I talk to people on the street who are saying, you know, I hope that I don't lose my tax write-off for my mortgage and things of that nature. So people are concerned at every level, and they're just waiting to see what Congress is going to do.
It's a situation where people seem to have a lot of questions, and there aren't that many answers. Is that what we're hearing? And is that what we heard in 2012?
I think that's 2012, and unfortunately for the future, when I think about 2013 and beyond, when we look at just our political society as it is right now, we see this great divide, and you say, when is this ever going to end? And the only way it looks like it's going to end if one party controls both houses and the presidency, and then that creates more turmoil. When you have such a polarizing fact with a nation, that just it's not good.
Let's talk about some local things too. We've had a lot of sad situations in Milwaukee in 2013. One was the situation of Derek Williams in the back of the squad car and the Milwaukee Police Department. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, it's a tragedy, you know, especially when we look upon Ernest Lacy, you know, something that happened 30 years ago, and you hope that, unfortunately, if something bad happens, you create law so it doesn't happen again, so at least you can learn from the misfortune. And I think what that teaches us is that we don't learn from our past, and that those past lessons keep coming up. And if that's the ideal and mentality that people have, I'm afraid of how they will begin to react.
And we've had other police incidents.
Well, just as the Ernest Lacy incident, which you mentioned, Doctor, what it gives rise to is new leadership and new energy to make change. And I think we've seen that here. For example, Micah, the Milwaukee Inner City Churches Allied for Hope, their leadership, Reverend Briscoe, has now come to the forefront, and behind him are a group of other ministers that are saying, we need a change in the police administration. That we probably would not have had were it not for these tragic incidents that had occurred that just cried out for change. And so I think those kinds of incidents, while they are tragic, they also prompt us to make changes in some of those systems that will allow us not to repeat those kinds of incidents again.
Thinking of making changes, the Fire and Police Commission made some changes.
Right.
What's going to happen with is that going to be reconstituted? Are they going to be changed? What do you think?
I think the public is demanding that they be reconstituted. Hopefully the innovative change will come. The mayor has announced that he has 2 new appointments that he's going to appoint to the commission, but the community is demanding that the commission actually be disassembled. So, you know, that's something that's hanging out there too. We know the mayor has the power to appoint, and there's been positions that have not been fulfilled on the commission for quite a while. So hopefully with the outcry from the community, that commission will look very openly and very clearly at all situations and look deeper than the surface.
You know, but I don't think this is an issue that's going to die down anytime soon, because you also have state lawmakers who are now looking at this saying the will of the people is not being heard, and that's problematic. And so I think this is definitely a story that's going to continue into 2013, not only looking at just the Fire and the Police Commission, but the Milwaukee Police Department and some of the actions that are happening there, because the public is outraged. And I don't necessarily know the history because I'm not from Milwaukee. I've been here for about 6 years now, and so I'm still doing some work to learn about things that have happened previously. But it seems as though the public is outraged, and they're not going to let these indiscretions by the Milwaukee police officers go.
And, you know, and that's one of the things Brother Gerard had brought up about Micah. They have an initiative 11 by 15 where they want to cut the prison population from 22,000 to 11,000 by the year 2015. And I'm really for that. But my question is now, when all of these inmates come out, what's waiting for them? And if something positive is not waiting for them, we put all of this energy into something then that has the potential to be very combustible, if you will. So I think what we have to do is to make sure that we're not, like I said, not only being active, but we're being productive. I see so many times people doing things that look good, but it doesn't have a lot of substance to it. And I think what we really have to do as we go in the forthcoming years is to do some things that really can make changes. If not, we're just spinning our wheels and things are going to get worse.
Let me ask you about 2012. What do you think was a good event in 2012? What moved us forward? What can we look back at and say, we're glad that that happened, or we're glad that somebody did something about that?
Okay, well, I'll just say the incident that just happened a couple of days ago, yesterday to be exact, with the Fire and Police Commission. They were able to reverse the decision that they had made. So I think that's something that possibly might move us forward as a community.
And I was going to say, I actually agree. While the acts that have happened have been unfortunate, I think in bringing a community together, that's definitely a positive outcome, and it seems as though that's happening.
And I'll go from a negative to a positive. I look at Superstorm Sandy and the devastation it brought. But that was one time where our political, somewhat enemies were able to come together and galvanize that spirit and really show oneness. So when I see that, I see hope for the future, even within the political parties.
Gerard, what do you think was a good thing in 2012?
And I'd have to go back to the election of so many young people that we hadn't anticipated would rise to leadership positions in our community. And I think that's what gives us hope going forward.
Do we also have hope going forward in the number of people who voted in the last election?
Absolutely.
people came out?
Yes.
Certainly we do.
87% turnout was amazing. And we should strive to top it again in the next election.
2014.
2014. Well, but there'll be elections between now
Well,
and then.
the midterms are really.
There will be spring elections coming up. As a matter of fact, there are certain judge positions that are up in this spring. So we got to get our community galvanized and get out there and support those judges that are being reelected.
And State Superintendent of Public Instruction, that position is up for reelection as well. So those who are looking to influence education policy in the state should certainly look to that opportunity to shape the direction the state will move in around education. You've got that chance to weigh in.
Speaking of education, we didn't talk about that subject. In 2012, what happened in education that you will remember?
Oh, I'd like to say that at North Division, I'm a proud alum of North Division High School. We started an alumni association 3 years ago, and it's growing. What we're doing is we're trying to work with North Division High School. The school has got a bad rap because the school board allowed it to be broken up into 2 or 3 small schools, but right now it's one comprehensive high school. They have a wonderful principal there. He's working with his teachers. The students, the attendance is up greatly, and there are people from all over the community that are interested in coming into North Division now. Students from all over the community and teachers are trying to come into North Division. So I think that's wonderful. We got a lot of steps that we got to take, but we're making some wonderful gains over there.
So
I think big picture, the implementation of Act 10 in Milwaukee come July 1st, and the influences that law will have as the Milwaukee School Board and other surrounding communities go through the process of implementing Act 10 fully will certainly give rise to either a lot more debate or some surprises in terms of positive outcomes as a result. Money saved that can be plowed back into the classroom, or new blood coming into the teaching ranks as a result of all of the retirements.
So we have a lot of things to look forward to. In the last few seconds, thumbs up or thumbs down for 2013? What do you say?
Oh, I'm always optimistic. So whatever you say, I think will happen. So I'm definitely 2 thumbs up.
Okay.
It's going to be a great year.
Well, I think it's going to be a wonderful year. We can only go forward.
I'm very optimistic.
All right. We'll have you all back hopefully at the end of 2013 and see if you were right.
All right.
Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's our program for this week. For Black Nouveau, I'm Joanne Williams. Thanks for watching, and again, Happy New Year.